Commander Lee Dae-ho stood at the bridge window watching the alien fleet arrange itself in perfect formation. The Vorthak ships moved like dancers following ancient steps that everyone knew by heart. Each vessel took its place in the line with mechanical precision that spoke of thousands of years of tradition. "They really do this every time," Captain Park So-min said as she joined him at the window. Her tactical gear was already strapped on and ready for the coming exercise. "Same formation, same approach, same everything." Lee nodded slowly. For 3 days he had studied the recordings Admiral Kim Tae-woo provided of previous species attempting to join the Galactic Council. Every single race had tried to copy the Vorthak fighting style or create their own version of honorable combat. Every single one had failed the first trial. "Sir, the Vorthak General Krexith is requesting formal communication," Lieutenant Yu called from the communication station. "Put him through," Lee said. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a massive reptilian creature covered in ceremonial armor. General Krexith's scales were deep green with gold markings that indicated his rank and battle honors. His eyes were the color of old amber and held the confidence of someone who had never lost a formal engagement. "Human Commander, Lee Dae-ho," Krexith spoke in the Universal Translator's flat tone. "I greet you with respect for the coming trial. Your species seeks membership in our ancient council and must prove worthiness through honorable combat. Do you accept the traditional terms of engagement?" Lee glanced at Dr. Yoon Ji-hee, who was monitoring from the science station. She had spent months studying alien military customs, and her expression said everything. The traditional terms meant fighting exactly the way the Vorthak expected. "General Krexith, we accept the trial, but we fight as humans fight," Lee replied carefully. "Of course," Krexith said with what might have been a smile on his scaled face. "All species bring their own honor to battle. We shall meet in glorious combat at the designated coordinates. May the worthiest emerge victorious." The communication ended, and Park moved closer to Lee. "He has no idea what he just agreed to," she said quietly. "Neither do we," Lee admitted. "This is completely new territory for humanity." Admiral Kim Tae-woo had been clear in his briefing. Humanity needed council membership to access trade routes and secure territory for their expanding population. Earth was overcrowded and the colonies needed resources that only council worlds could provide. Failure meant isolation and eventual stagnation, but success meant proving humanity belonged among species that had been traveling the stars for millennia. The pressure was enormous, and every decision could affect the future of the entire human race. "All units report ready," Major Kang Hyejin announced from the tactical station. "The Vorthak fleet is moving to combat positions." Lee studied the display showing both fleets. The aliens maintained their perfect formation while human ships spread out in what looked like random patterns. To alien eyes, it probably appeared chaotic and unprofessional. "Begin Phase 1, Lee ordered. Captain Park's Special Forces unit launched in small stealth craft that the sensors barely detected. While the Vorthak focused on the main human fleet, Park's people moved around the edges of the battlefield like shadows. "Vorthak fleet is hailing us," Lieutenant Yu reported. "They want to know when we will advance to meet them in honorable combat." "Tell them we are preparing our challenge," Lee said. He watched as Park's unit reached position behind asteroid cover. "Major Kang, are you ready with the communications?" "Yes, sir. False signals prepared and standing by." Dr. Yoon looked confused. "Commander, what exactly are we doing? This doesn't match any of the combat doctrines I studied." "That's the point," Lee said. "Every species that tried to join the council studied their enemies and tried to beat them at their own game. We're going to play a completely different game." The Vorthak fleet began its traditional advance. Each ship moved forward in synchronized formation that was beautiful to watch. Their weapons charged with energy signatures that painted pretty patterns across space. Everything about their approach spoke of ceremony and ritual combat between equals. "Now," Lee said. Major Kang activated the false communication signals that made it appear human reinforcements were arriving from multiple directions. The Vorthak sensors detected the fake signatures and their formation wavered slightly as they tried to account for enemies that didn't exist. At the same moment, Park's stealth units opened fire from behind the asteroids. Their weapons weren't aimed at the Vorthak ships but at the space around them. Explosive charges created debris fields that disrupted the alien formation's perfect lines. "What are they doing?" General Krexith's voice came over the open channel. "This is not proper combat protocol." Lee ignored the transmission and gave his next order. "All units execute scatter pattern." The human fleet broke apart in directions that seemed random but were carefully planned. Some ships appeared to retreat, while others moved to flanking positions. A few vessels powered down their engines and drifted like disabled craft. The Vorthak tried to maintain their formation, but found themselves facing enemies from multiple angles. Their traditional combat doctrine had no response for opponents who refused to meet them in direct battle. "Sir, the Vorthak are requesting clarification of our tactics," Lieutenant Yu said. "Tell them we are demonstrating human military capabilities," Lee replied. Park's voice came through the communications. "Daeho, they're completely confused. Half their ships are trying to engage us while the other half are still waiting for formal combat to begin." "Perfect. Begin Phase 2. The human ships that had appeared to retreat suddenly reversed course and attacked the Vorthak flanks. The vessels that seemed disabled powered up and struck from unexpected angles. Meanwhile, Park's units continued their hit-and-run attacks from the asteroid field. General Krexith's formation began to collapse as his commanders tried to respond to threats from all directions. The Vorthak had trained for thousands of years to fight honorable duels and formal battles. They had no experience with enemies who attacked from hiding places and refused direct confrontation. "This is not warfare," Krexith transmitted. "This is deception and cowardice." Dr. Yoon looked troubled. "Commander, he might be right. By their standards, we are fighting dishonorably." "By their standards," Lee agreed. "But we're not them." The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was already decided. Human forces struck wherever the Vorthak were weakest and vanished before the aliens could respond. When the Vorthak tried to corner them, the humans used the asteroid field and debris clouds for cover. Admiral Kim watched from the observation deck as the Vorthak fleet finally admitted defeat. Their ships had taken minimal damage, but their formation was completely broken, and their commanders were thoroughly demoralized. "Remarkable," he said to himself. "We didn't win by being stronger or faster. We won by fighting in ways they never imagined possible." General Krexith's final transmission was formal, but cold. "The humans have achieved victory. However, the methods employed raise questions about compatibility with Council values. This trial is complete, but the evaluation continues." As both fleets returned to the neutral station, Dr. Yoon approached Commander Lee with obvious concern. "Sir, I think we may have made a serious mistake. Everything I learned about Council membership suggests they value honor and tradition above tactical victory." Lee nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe, but they also respect results. We'll find out soon enough whether being effective matters more than being traditional." Captain Park returned from her successful mission with a grin on her face. "Did you see how confused they looked when we attacked from the asteroids? It was like they had never considered that space combat could happen anywhere except in open formation." "That's exactly the problem," Dr. Yoon said. "They haven't considered it because their entire culture is built around predictable, honorable warfare. We just introduced chaos into a system that has worked for them for thousands of years." Admiral Kim joined the group as they watched the Vorthak ships departing. "The Council has scheduled a review of our performance. General Krexith will present his assessment along with representatives from the other major species." "What do you think they'll decide?" Park asked. "I think," Lee said slowly, "we're about to find out whether the galaxy is ready for humanity or whether humanity is ready for the galaxy." The human fleet began its own departure from the trial zone, leaving behind a battlefield that looked nothing like the formal duels the Council was used to seeing. Equipment debris floated in patterns that spoke of unconventional tactics and asymmetric warfare. As they traveled back to the Council station, each human crew member understood they had just changed the rules of galactic warfare forever. Whether that change would be welcomed or rejected remained to be seen, but there was no going back to the way things were before humanity arrived on the scene. The second trial came 3 days after the Council finished arguing about the first one. Dr. Yoon Ji-hye had spent those days listening to alien debates through the diplomatic channels, and her reports were troubling. Half the council called human tactics brilliant, while the other half used words like treacherous and barbaric. The Klixen are completely different from the Vorthak, she explained to the assembled human officers. They fight like a chess game with moves that follow precise patterns. Every attack has a counterattack, and every formation has a response. They've been studying warfare as a science for over 2,000 years. Lieutenant Colonel Choi Min-ho leaned back in his chair at the briefing table. His specialty was psychological operations, and his interest was clearly growing as Dr. Yoon continued her explanation. Their entire military structure is based on predicting enemy actions and responding with the mathematically optimal counter, she said. They fought 17 different species over the centuries and defeated all of them by outthinking their tactical approaches. Commander Lee Dae-ho studied the holographic display showing Klixen fleet movements from previous battles. The insectoid ships moved in patterns that were beautiful in their complexity. Every vessel had a specific role, and every maneuver served a larger strategic purpose. They expect us to study their methods and try to create counters for their standard tactics, Lee said. Just like every other species has done. Exactly, Dr. Yoon confirmed. And they've developed responses to every counterattack anyone has ever tried. Their computer systems can predict battle outcomes with 97% accuracy based on opening moves. Major Kang Hee-jin looked up from her communication equipment. What if we don't give them any opening moves to analyze? What do you mean? Captain Park So-min asked. What if we make them think they're fighting a completely different battle than the one we're actually fighting? Choi Min-ho smiled slowly. Now that's interesting. Their whole system depends on accurate information about enemy capabilities and intentions. What happens if we feed them false information? Lee nodded as the plan began to take shape in his mind. They want to play chess against us, but they can't play chess if they don't know what pieces we actually have on the board. The briefing continued for 2 more hours as the human team developed their approach. Unlike the previous trial against the Vorthak, this time they would need to be subtle. The Klixen would be analyzing every human action for patterns and tactical significance. Remember, Lee said as the meeting ended, this isn't about winning a battle. It's about proving that human thinking belongs in the galactic community. We need to show them something they've never seen before. The next morning brought a formal challenge from Klixen battle coordinator Jexty. The insectoid appeared on the communication screen with 4 arms manipulating data displays, while compound eyes tracked multiple information streams simultaneously. Human forces, Jexty spoke through the translator in a voice that buzzed like machinery. Your species has demonstrated unconventional approaches in previous trials. We are prepared for your methods and have calculated appropriate responses. The trial will commence when you signal readiness. We are honored by the challenge, Lee replied formally. May the best tactics prevail. As soon as the communication ended, Major Kang began broadcasting false radio chatter across multiple frequencies. Her team had spent days creating fake conversations between imaginary human units, discussing non-existent battle plans and fictional reinforcements. Alpha Squadron reports ready for flanking maneuver, one transmission said. Beta Wing confirms. Stealth approach vector, came another fake report. Titan Command acknowledges orbital bombardment coordinates, a third voice added. The Klixen sensors detected all of these communications, and their analysis computers began processing the information. According to their data, the humans had at least 3 times as many ships as visual confirmation showed, plus capabilities that didn't match any of their previous observations. Sergeant Baek Jun-soo worked with his demolitions team to create false installations that would appear on enemy sensors as weapons platforms and command centers. They built structures from spare metal and electronic components that generated the right energy signatures without actually being functional. The Klixen long-range scanners are very sophisticated, Dr. Yoon explained as she watched the preparations, but they're designed to identify real military targets. These decoys should register as significant threats. Lieutenant Colonel Choi added his own touches to the deception. His psychological warfare specialists created false electronic signatures, suggesting that human ships were equipped with weapon systems that didn't actually exist. If the clicks-in analysis computers were looking for patterns, they would find patterns that led to completely wrong conclusions. The trial began exactly as scheduled, with the clicks-in fleet moving into their traditional opening formation, 12 ships arranged in a complex geometric pattern that had been refined over centuries of tactical development. Each vessel knew its role, and every commander understood the mathematical principles behind their positioning. "They're beautiful," Captain Park observed as she watched the enemy formation through the tactical display. "Like a dance that's been choreographed by computers." "And they're about to dance with a partner who doesn't know the steps," Lee said. "Begin transmission sequence." Major Kang activated the prepared communication protocols that made it appear human forces were coordinating attacks from 17 different directions. The fake radio chatter described tactical movements that would require massive fleets and sophisticated planning. Meanwhile, Sergeant Bayek's decoy installations began broadcasting false sensor readings that suggested human bases were scattered throughout the trial zone. The clicks-in computers detected what appeared to be command centers, weapons platforms, and staging areas for surprise attacks. "Sir, the clicks-in formation is changing," reported Lieutenant Yu from the sensor station. "They're spreading out to cover more potential threat vectors." "Perfect," Choi said with satisfaction. "They're responding to threats that don't exist while ignoring our actual positions." The real human fleet was much smaller than the clicks-in believed and positioned in completely different locations than the false communications suggested. While the enemy adjusted their formation to counter imaginary attacks, the actual human ships moved into optimal firing positions. "Zhexti is requesting clarification of human force disposition," Major Kang reported. "Their computers are having trouble analyzing our tactical structure." "Tell them we are implementing standard human combat doctrine," Lee replied. "Which is technically true, since this is how we always fight." Dr. Yoon watched her displays showing clicks-in communication patterns. "Their command structure is starting to break down. Different ships are receiving conflicting analysis from their tactical computers. Some think we have overwhelming force, while others believe we're trying to bluff with minimal assets. They're used to fighting enemies who play by mathematical rules," Captain Park observed. "Mathematics works when you have accurate data. We're giving them data that's technically accurate but completely misleading." The clicks-in began making tactical mistakes as their formation tried to respond to contradictory information. Ships moved to counterattacks that weren't coming while leaving themselves vulnerable to the attacks that were actually planned. Lieutenant Colonel Choi watched with professional appreciation as the enemy fleet became increasingly disorganized. "They're fighting themselves now. Every time their computers suggest a counter-move, our false data makes them doubt the analysis." "Beginning actual attack sequence," Lee announced. The human ships that had been hiding in sensor shadows suddenly appeared and struck at clicks-in vessels that were out of position. Meanwhile, the false installations continued broadcasting fake signals that convinced the enemy that much larger attacks were coming from completely different directions. Battle Coordinator Jext's transmissions became increasingly frantic as the clicks-in tried to process information that didn't make sense according to their tactical models. Their ships were taking real damage from attacks they hadn't predicted, while their computers insisted that the main human assault was still coming from elsewhere. "This is impossible," Jexti broadcast on the general frequency. "Human tactics do not follow logical patterns. How do you coordinate attacks without mathematical planning?" "We improvise," Lee replied simply. The word didn't translate well into clicks-in language, and their computers spent valuable processing power trying to analyze a concept that didn't exist in their tactical database. While they struggled with the translation, human forces continued their assault on the confused alien formation. Sergeant Bayek's demolitions team added to the chaos by detonating charges that created false explosions in empty space. The clicks-in sensors registered these as evidence of battles happening in locations where no human ships were actually present. "Sir, the clicks-in are requesting immediate cessation of hostilities," Lieutenant Yu announced. Battle Coordinator Jexti claims the exercise has become compromised by unknown variables. Lee considered the request while watching his tactical display. The clicks-in fleet was thoroughly defeated, but not significantly damaged. Engineer Oh Dong-woo stood in the cargo bay surrounded by what looked like junk from a construction site. Steel beams, concrete blocks, industrial cables, and sheets of metal plating filled every available space. His team was busy welding mounting brackets and loading mechanisms while other crew members wondered if the engineer had lost his mind. "Sir, I still don't understand how this is supposed to work," Captain Ryu Yoon-suk said as she examined a projectile launcher that had been built from spare parts and civilian equipment. "These aren't weapons, they're building materials." "That's exactly the point," Oh replied while checking the structural integrity of a concrete-filled missile casing. "The Nethrix have energy absorption technology that makes conventional weapons useless. Every species that fought them tried to build better energy weapons and failed." Dr. Yoon-ji-hai looked up from her analysis of previous battles against the energy beings. "The Nethrix crystalline ships can absorb, store, and redirect any form of energy attack. Lasers, plasma bolts, particle beams, even nuclear explosions. Just make them stronger. So we don't use energy weapons," Oh said simply. "We use physics." Commander Lee Dae-ho watched the preparations with growing confidence. The third trial had seemed impossible when Admiral Kim Tae-woo first described it. The Nethrix were the most advanced species in the Council with technology that bordered on magical. Their ships could manipulate energy like living beings, and their defenses had never been penetrated. "The Council expects us to attempt some breakthrough in energy weapon technology," Lee said. "They've probably prepared speeches about human innovation and persistence. Instead, we're going to throw rocks at them," Captain Park So-min said with amusement. "Very expensive, carefully engineered rocks, but still rocks." Scientist Nam Kyung-min finished loading the last of the modified civilian ships with kinetic projectiles. The vessels had been stripped of all energy weapons and fitted with simple launch systems that could fire solid objects at high velocity. "The beauty of kinetic weapons is their simplicity," Nam explained to the gathered officers. "No energy signatures to absorb, no complex technology to counter, just mass and velocity following the laws of physics." Engineer O held up a steel rod that had been shaped into a simple spear point. "This weighs 50 kilograms and we can accelerate it to significant fractions of light speed using conventional drives. The impact energy comes from motion, not from any power source the Nethrix can absorb. Their sensors won't even recognize these as weapons," Dr. Yoon added. "According to their databases, no species has used purely kinetic attacks for over 1,000 years. They'll register as debris or construction materials until impact." The briefing was interrupted by a communication from the Nethrix representative. The being that appeared on screen was difficult to describe, shifting between crystalline and energy forms like a living gemstone made of captured starlight. "Human entities," the Nethrix spoke in harmonics that the translator struggled to process. "We acknowledge your species' unconventional approaches in previous trials. However, our energy mastery represents the pinnacle of galactic technology. No force in known space can penetrate our defensive matrices." "We look forward to the challenge," Lee replied diplomatically. "May we learn from each other through honest competition." "Indeed, we shall demonstrate why energy manipulation remains the ultimate expression of advanced civilization." As the communication ended, Captain Ryu checked her modified ship's systems one final time. The vessel had been a civilian transport before O's team converted it into a kinetic weapons platform. Instead of passenger compartments, it now carried tons of carefully shaped projectiles. "This feels like bringing a slingshot to a laser fight," she said. "More like bringing a slingshot to a magic show," O replied. "But physics works the same everywhere, even against beings made of energy." The trial zone was a carefully designated area of space away from any inhabited systems. The Nethrix arrived in ships that looked like living crystals, their hulls shifting between transparency and brilliant colors as energy flowed through their structures. "Magnificent," Dr. Yoon whispered as she watched the alien vessels maneuver. "They're not just using energy technology, they've become energy technology, which gives them weaknesses as well as strengths," Nam observed. "Energy beings are used to thinking in terms of energy interactions. Mass and momentum might be outside their normal experience." The Nethrix fleet arranged itself in a formation that resembled a complex geometric pattern, each ship positioned to maximize energy sharing and defensive coverage. Their shields began to glow as power flowed between vessels, creating a network of protective barriers. Beginning trial engagement, the Nethrix leader transmitted. We invite human forces to demonstrate their capabilities against our energy. Mastery. Acknowledged, Lee replied. All human units begin attack sequence. The modified civilian ships spread out and began launching their unconventional ammunition. Steel rods, concrete blocks, and metal fragments accelerated toward the Nethrix formation at tremendous speeds. The alien sensors detected the incoming objects, but their identification systems were confused. The projectiles generated no energy signatures and followed simple ballistic trajectories that registered as non-threatening debris. What is the purpose of this material discharge? The Nethrix leader inquired. Are these weapons or construction waste? Both, Lee answered honestly. The first kinetic impacts struck Nethrix shields with results that shocked both sides. The energy barriers that could absorb and redirect particle beams and plasma bolts offered no resistance to solid matter, moving at relativistic speeds. Steel rods punched through crystalline hulls like needles through soap. Impossible, the Nethrix transmitted. Our defensive matrices show no energy weapon impacts. That's because they aren't energy weapons, Captain Ryu said as she launched another volley of concrete-filled projectiles. They're just very fast rocks. The Nethrix tried to respond with their traditional energy attacks, but human ships had no advanced shielding to target. The alien weapons struck simple metal hulls and armor plating that absorbed the energy harmlessly, or reflected it in random directions. Their entire weapons philosophy is based on overwhelming enemy energy systems, Dr. Yoon observed. But our ships don't have energy systems for them to overwhelm. Engineer O watched with satisfaction as his improvised weapons continued to find their targets. They can't absorb the kinetic energy of a steel beam moving at significant fractions of light speed because that energy comes from motion, not from any power source. The Nethrix formation began to break apart as more kinetic projectiles found their marks. Their beautiful crystal ships were vulnerable to simple physical impacts in ways their designers had never anticipated. Holes appeared in hulls that could shrug off nuclear explosions. Human tactics are incomprehensible, the Nethrix leader transmitted with what sounded like frustration. These projectiles should not be effective against our advanced defensive systems. They're effective because they're not advanced, Lee explained. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. Captain Ryu's ship closed in for another attack run, launching a spread of metal fragments that had been accelerated to tremendous velocity. The projectiles struck a Nethrix vessel and penetrated deep into its crystalline structure, disrupting the energy flows that kept the ship functional. Sir, they're trying to adapt their shields to stop kinetic impacts, Lieutenant Yu reported. From the sensor station. Can they do it? Captain Park asked. Not without fundamentally changing their entire technology base, Nam replied. Energy manipulation can't easily counter pure physics. They'd need to develop completely new defensive systems. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Nethrix ships took heavy damage, while human vessels remained largely untouched. The alien energy weapons were impressive, but ineffective against simple metal armor and basic defensive systems. We acknowledge tactical defeat, the Nethrix leader finally transmitted. Human methods have proven effective despite their primitive nature. This outcome requires extensive analysis. As both fleets disengaged, Dr. Yoon began collecting data on Nethrix communications during the engagement. They're calling our tactics primitive, but they can't argue with the results. We defeated the most advanced technology in the galaxy using methods their ancestors might have used thousands of years ago. That's going to cause some serious discussions in the council, Admiral Kim said as he joined the post-battle briefing. 3 trials, 3 victories, 3 completely different approaches. The other species don't know what to make of us. What they don't understand is that humans don't have one fighting style, Lee said. We adapt to whatever the situation requires. Sometimes that means advanced tactics, and sometimes it means throwing rocks really hard. Engineer O was already planning modifications for future encounters. The beautiful thing about kinetic weapons is their scalability. We can make them bigger, faster, or more numerous depending on what we're facing. The question is whether the Council will see our adaptability as a strength or a threat, Captain Park said. We've now proven that we can defeat any of their major military powers using methods they never anticipated. Dr. Yoon looked thoughtful as she reviewed the battle data. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species debated humanity's trials. Admiral Kim Tae-woo listened through the diplomatic channels, while Commander Lee Dae-ho studied tactical displays that showed the impossible challenge they now faced. "They're scared," Dr. Yoon Ji-hai said quietly as she monitored alien communications. 3 victories using completely different methods has them questioning everything they thought they knew about warfare. "So they've decided to stack the deck," Major Song Yoo-jung added from her intelligence station. "All 3 species working together, fighting on terrain they've chosen, with every possible advantage." Colonel Han Woo-jin looked at the tactical projections showing the trial zone. It was a complex asteroid field near a neutron star where gravitational effects would limit human mobility while providing cover for alien forces. The Vorthak had established honor dueling grounds. The Klixen had set up strategic calculation centers, and the Nethrix had positioned energy manipulation platforms. "They've never actually fought together before," Song observed. "Each species has its own command structure and tactical philosophy. That might be something we can use." "The Council expects this to be the trial that finally stops us," Lee said, as he studied enemy positions. "Overwhelming force, familiar territory, coordinated attacks from multiple directions. They want to prove that human tactics have limits." Private Lee Ki-tai checked his equipment for the 3rd time. At 19 years old, he was the youngest member of the assault team, and clearly nervous about facing 3 alien military forces simultaneously. His hands shook slightly as he loaded ammunition that might need to last for hours of combat. "Sir, intelligence reports show the 3 species have been trying to coordinate their attack plans," Song reported. "But their communication protocols are completely different. The Vorthak use formal challenge announcements, the Klixen prefer mathematical battle calculations, and the Nethrix communicate through energy harmonics." "Translation problems?" Han asked with interest. "Worse than that. Philosophical problems. They can't agree on basic concepts like what constitutes honorable engagement or optimal tactical positioning." Lee nodded slowly as the plan began forming in his mind. "They're trying to combine 3 different approaches to warfare without understanding how those approaches conflict with each other." The formal challenge came from all 3 species simultaneously, their transmissions overlapping in a cacophony of different languages and tactical concepts. General Krexith spoke of honorable combat, Battle Coordinator Zhexti calculated probability matrices, and the Nethrix leader harmonized about energy supremacy. "Human forces," the combined transmission concluded. "You face the united strength of Council military doctrine. Demonstrate your adaptability against coordinated opposition." "We accept the challenge," Lee replied simply. "May the best tactics prevail." As the human fleet moved toward the trial zone, every crew member understood the stakes. Failure here would end humanity's bid for Council membership and leave Earth isolated from galactic civilization. Success would prove that human warfare could overcome any obstacle. "Remember," Lee announced over the fleet communications, "we're not fighting 3 separate enemies. We're fighting one confused enemy that's trying to use 3 different strategies at the same time." The battle began exactly as the aliens had planned. Vorthak forces charged forward in traditional formation, while Klixen ships calculated optimal attack vectors and Nethrix vessels began building energy networks. For the first time in the trials, human forces seemed to be facing coordinated opposition. "They're actually working together," Captain Park So-min observed from her command position. "This is what real galactic military power looks like." "Watch their communication patterns," Major Song suggested. "They're coordinating but not effectively." The alien coordination began breaking down within minutes. Vorthak commanders wanted to engage in formal duels, but Klixen forces were positioning for calculated strikes that disrupted the honor formations. Meanwhile, Nethrix energy flows interfered with both alien factions' sensor systems. "Now," Lee ordered, "begin separation protocol." Human forces launched targeted strikes not at alien ships, but at their communication arrays and coordination systems. The attacks were surgical and precise, designed to disrupt information flow between the three species without causing significant damage. Colonel Han's special operations teams infiltrated the asteroid field, using stealth approaches that avoided detection. Their mission wasn't to engage enemy forces directly, but to create situations where the three alien factions would interfere with each other. Sir, Vorthak General Krexith is requesting Klixen Battle Coordinator Zexti to adjust formation for proper combat protocols, Lieutenant Yu reported. Zexti is responding that mathematical optimization requires current positioning. Perfect, Song said with satisfaction. They're arguing about tactics while we're implementing strategy. Private. Li Kite found himself separated from his unit when a Nethrix energy blast disrupted his transport. Instead of retreating, the young soldier took position in an abandoned asteroid mining station and prepared to hold his ground against impossible odds. Kite, fall back to rally point, Han ordered over the communications. Sir, I can't. Kite replied as alien forces closed in around his position, but I can hold them here and buy time for the main operation. Negative, return to formation. With respect, sir, I'm staying. What followed became legend among human forces. For 18 hours, Private Li Kite held a critical choke point against waves of alien attackers. He used every trick he had learned, in training plus several he invented on the spot, turning the mining station into a fortress that channeled enemy attacks into predictable patterns. The Vorthak tried to challenge him to honorable single combat, but Kite ignored their formal protocols and fought like his life depended on it. The Klixen calculated optimal assault vectors, but Kite's responses were pure improvisation that defied mathematical prediction. The Nethrix attempted energy manipulation attacks, but Kite's simple kinetic weapons and basic armor proved frustratingly effective. That boy is writing the textbook on human stubbornness, Captain Park said as she monitored his situation. He's not just refusing to die, he's making it look easy. Meanwhile, Colonel Han's teams succeeded in their primary mission. By disrupting alien coordination systems, they forced the three species to rely on their individual tactical approaches without central command. The careful battle plan dissolved into chaos as each faction pursued its own objectives. The Vorthak are trying to establish formal dueling protocols, Song reported. The Klixen are calculating independent strike patterns, and the Nethrix are building energy networks that interfere with both other species. They're fighting 3 separate battles in the same space, Lee observed. Time to exploit the confusion. Human forces struck wherever the alien coordination was weakest. When Vorthak honor guards left their positions to engage in formal combat, human ships attacked the gaps in their formation. When Klixen vessels focused on mathematical calculations, kinetic weapons disrupted their precise positioning. When Nethrix energy networks reached peak efficiency, simple physical impacts broke their crystalline focusing arrays. The turning point came when Private Kite's determined defense allowed human forces to establish a forward base in the asteroid field. His 18-hour stand had given the main fleet time to position for decisive strikes against all 3 alien forces simultaneously. Sir, the aliens are requesting immediate cessation of hostilities, Lieutenant Yu announced. All 3 species are claiming tactical victory, while simultaneously acknowledging strategic defeat. How is that possible? Captain Park asked. Each species thinks they fought well according to their own standards, Dr. Yoon explained. The Vorthak believe they maintained honor, the Klixen achieved mathematical optimization, and the Nethrix demonstrated energy superiority, but none of them accomplished their strategic objectives. Lee studied the tactical display showing alien forces in complete disarray. Ships from all 3 species were damaged but not destroyed, scattered but not routed. The human fleet had taken casualties but remained combat effective. Tell them we're prepared to end hostilities when all 3 factions acknowledge combined tactical defeat, Lee said. The response took almost an hour as the 3 species argued among themselves about the terms of surrender. Finally, General Krexith spoke for all of them. Human forces have achieved victory through methods that exceed our collective analytical capabilities. This outcome was not predicted by our combined tactical models, and requires extensive review by the full council. As both sides disengaged, Private Kite was extracted from his mining station position. The young soldier was exhausted but uninjured, having held his ground through pure determination and creative use of available resources. "How did you do it?" Colonel Han asked as Kite was brought aboard the command ship. "Sir, I just refused to give up," Kite replied. "Every time they tried something new, I found a way to make it not work. Eventually, they ran out of new things to try." "That might be the most accurate description of human warfare I've ever heard," Admiral Kim said as he reviewed the battle reports. "We don't win by being stronger or smarter." The council chamber had never been so divided. For 3 days, representatives from 47 different species had argued about humanity's place in galactic civilization, while Commander Lee Dae-ho and his team waited for a decision that would determine the future of their entire race. Ambassador Shin Haiwan stood before the assembled aliens with the patience that came from years of diplomatic training. Her job was to convince beings who had lived for centuries that a species barely 200 years into space travel deserved membership in their ancient organization. "The human military trials have concluded," Council Leader Vexithera announced in a voice that carried the weight of millennia. 4 engagements, 4 victories, 4 demonstrations of tactical approaches that challenge fundamental assumptions about civilized warfare. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai monitored the translation systems as dozens of species began talking simultaneously. The debate had been raging since the 4th trial ended and showed no signs of resolution. Some aliens praised human innovation while others condemned human methods as barbaric. General No Sang-ho sat quietly in the human delegation area, his weathered face showing the experience of someone who had fought in humanity's colonial wars. At 73 years old, he had seen more combat than most species experienced in their entire history. The Vorthok delegation raises concerns about human disregard for honorable combat protocols. Vexithara continued. Battle Coordinator, Jexti questions human compatibility with logical tactical frameworks. The Nethrix Collective expresses uncertainty about human technological philosophy. "They're afraid of us," General No said quietly to Ambassador Shin. 4 impossible victories have them questioning whether they understand warfare at all. "Can you blame them?" Dr. Yoon asked. "We've defeated their 3 most powerful military forces using methods they never imagined possible. The question before this council," Vexithera announced, "is whether human military capabilities represent evolution or devolution of galactic warfare doctrine." Ambassador Shin rose to address the assembly. "Honored council members, humanity seeks not to replace your traditions but to add our own voice to the galactic community. Our methods may seem unconventional, but they arise from our unique evolutionary history." "Unique how?" demanded General Krexith from the Vorthak delegation. "Every species develops military doctrine based on their homeworld conditions." "Earth was not kind to humanity," General No said as he stood to join the ambassador. "Our world taught us that survival comes before honor, victory before tradition, adaptation before rigid doctrine." The ancient recordings began playing on the chamber's display systems. Dr. Yoon had spent weeks preparing this presentation, showing alien representatives the harsh realities of human evolution. Images of ice ages, natural disasters, predator, species, and environmental challenges that had shaped humanity's development. "Your species evolved on stable worlds with predictable challenges," Dr. Yoon explained. "Humanity evolved on a planet that tried to kill us in new ways every few thousand years. We learned to adapt or die. This explains your tactical flexibility," Battle Coordinator Zexti acknowledged. "But it does not address concerns about human reliability as council members." "What concerns?" Admiral Kim Tae-woo asked from his position with the human delegation. "Your species fights without honor codes," General Krexith said. "How can we trust allies who ignore the rules of civilized engagement?" "Because we don't ignore rules," Lee replied. "We just don't assume that your rules are the only possible rules." Council Leader Vexithara raised a crystalline appendage for silence. The debate centers on fundamental questions about the nature of civilized behavior. Are humans capable of peaceful coexistence with species that value tradition and predictability? We've coexisted peacefully with dozens of species in our own stellar neighborhood, Ambassador Shin pointed out. We've never initiated hostilities with any galactic power. But you've defeated every galactic power that tested you, the Nethrix representative harmonized. This creates uncertainty about human intentions. General No stepped forward with the dignity that came from a lifetime of military service. Honored Council, I've fought in 17 separate conflicts during humanity's expansion into space. Every one of those wars started because someone decided that humans were too weak, too primitive, or too disorganized to defend themselves. And? Vexithara prompted. They were wrong every time. Not because we're stronger or smarter than our enemies, but because we refuse to lose. When everything else fails, humans find a way to keep fighting. That's exactly what concerns us, a representative from the Crystalline Thecni Coalition said. Species that never surrender are dangerous to galactic stability. Dr. Yoon activated another set of historical recordings. Let me show you something that might change your perspective. The images showed the Council's own history from thousands of years ago, before the honor codes and formal combat protocols existed. Massive wars that devastated entire star systems, conflicts that eliminated species and left dead worlds in their wake. You created your honor codes to prevent this from happening again, Dr. Yoon said. Formal warfare with limited objectives and predictable outcomes. It's worked beautifully for maintaining galactic peace. Then why change it? General Krexith demanded. Because it only works when everyone follows the same rules, General No replied. What happens when you face an enemy that doesn't care about your honor codes? What happens when something threatens the galaxy that can't be defeated through formal combat? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For thousands of years, the Council had maintained peace through mutual agreement on warfare limitations, but their system was vulnerable to anyone who refused to play by established rules. The galaxy is vast, Ambassador Shin said into the silence. Somewhere out there are threats that won't be impressed by your traditions or stopped by your protocols. When that day comes, you'll need allies who know how to fight without rules. You're asking us to trust a species that specializes in breaking rules? The Clixon representative buzzed. We're asking you to trust a species that specializes in winning, Lee corrected. Your rules are good for preventing unnecessary conflicts. Our methods are good for ending necessary ones. Council leader Vexithera looked around the chamber at representatives who had been debating for days without reaching consensus. The ancient archives speak of times when the galaxy faced existential threats that formal warfare could not address. Before the honor codes, the Thecni representative acknowledged reluctantly. When survival required methods we now consider uncivilized, humanity offers a balance, Dr. Yoon said. We can learn your diplomatic methods for peaceful disputes. You can learn our military methods for existential threats. And if humans decide that every conflict is an existential threat, General Krexith asked, then you'll know we're no different from any other species that's ever threatened galactic peace, Admiral Kim replied. And you'll deal with us accordingly. The honesty of the statement seemed to surprise many council members. Most applicant species spent their time promising peaceful intentions and harmless motivations. Humanity was openly acknowledging their potential danger while arguing for membership anyway. We don't want to conquer the galaxy, General No said. We want to help protect it. But protection sometimes requires methods that civilized species prefer not to think about. Council leader Vexithera consulted with advisors for several minutes before speaking again. The Council recognizes that galactic security may require diverse approaches to military challenges. However, human integration must include safeguards against misuse of unconventional capabilities. What kind of safeguards? Ambassador Shin asked. Human military forces will operate under Council oversight for external conflicts. Internal disputes involving Council members will follow established protocols. Only verified existential threats will justify unrestricted human warfare. Methods. Lee considered the terms carefully. They were restrictive but not unreasonable. Humanity would have Council membership but with limited military autonomy. It was better than isolation but far from full acceptance. We accept those conditions, he said after consulting with his delegation. Then let it be recorded, Vexthara announced, that humanity is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, with full review scheduled after 100 standard years of compliance with agreed limitations. The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives from dozens of species reacted to the historic decision. Some celebrated while others expressed concerns, but the debate was finally over. Private Lee Kitei watched from the observation gallery as the formal ceremony began. At 19 years old, he had become famous throughout human space as the soldier who held impossible ground against 3 alien military forces. Now he represented humanity's future in a galaxy that was still deciding whether humans belonged among the stars. "Sir," he asked General No during a break in the proceedings, "do you think they'll ever really trust us?" "Trust isn't the goal," the old soldier replied. "Respect is, and respect comes from proving that we can be counted on when everything else fails. Even if they don't like our methods, especially if they don't like our methods. The galaxy is full of species that fight pretty wars with elegant tactics,